Good morning, everyone. It's Valentine's Day.
Welcome.
So it's February 14th, 2021, and this is the season of love. This is the month where our theme is love, really.
I know it's the season of love because the iguanas, we have iguanas here,
Oh, yes.
are all in heat and showing their colors and looking for it. Some of them have their resumes out. Some of them are showing pictures of their families. It's amazing. Yeah.
The male iguanas, certainly the dominant male iguanas, turn an orange color, and they're huge. They are so big. Their heads are like 4 and 5 inches big. And they're just, we go out and look at them near our waterway, our canal, and they like to hang out in trees that where they could jump into the water if they want to. So it's quite a sight to see. And the trees are full of iguanas,
So
not
today,
just
what
those.
we wanted to talk about was iguanas.
Iguana love. Iguana love. That's what
Yeah.
we want to talk about. So before we start, I would like to I'd like to start with a reading. And at first, it sounds like it doesn't have anything to do with love, but it does. And it's entitled I Accept My Good by our Ernest Holmes, our founder. And he says, God speaks when we listen. God is there when we open the door. And when we listen, there is a response from something greater than ourselves that is an infinite person with a capital P, the limitless possibility. God speaks wherever and whenever we listen to our inner voice. There is a presence in the universe that is personal to us. It is the spirit of which we are the direct individualizations. Whenever we create an idea, it is because a demand has been made upon the mind of God that is incarnated, embodied in us. Now, this is the part that can seem complicated. We mentally measure out what we shall receive in terms of the limitations of our previous experiences. So let me repeat that and give you an example. Like if we feel like we haven't been very loved, then we physically mete out and measure what we shall receive in terms of that experience. We kind of don't expect to be loved. We mentally measure out what we shall receive in terms of the limitations of our previous experiences. We could also make that receiving money. But little by little, we see that we can grow, and experience adds to experience until we accumulate an ever greater possibility. Each one of us is a direct inlet and direct outlet to God. This infinite personalness residing within us is never limited by or separated from us except by the degree of our own ignorance. In other words, if we don't know this is the way it works anyway, but we are ignorant of it. Our inner voice is always instantly available to guide and direct us through the vicissitudes of living. Now, this is the affirmation or affirmative prayer that you're welcome to repeat as I say it. I listen
I listen
with complete faith
with complete faith
and
and
trust
trust
to the voice of
to
love
the voice of love
guiding me today.
guiding me today.
I accept
I accept
the abundant
the
good
abundant good
that flows easily and freely
that flows easily and freely
to me.
to me.
In return,
In return,
I am loving
I am loving
and
and
generous
generous
to all
to
others,
all others,
knowing
knowing
that we are joined
that we are joined
in spirit.
in spirit.
My whole mind
My whole mind
is open
is open
to the divine
to the
influx
divine influx
of joy,
of joy,
love,
love,
wisdom,
wisdom,
and
and
guidance.
guidance. And so
My
it is.
life prospers, and so it is.
It's a powerful reading. Powerful
It,
reading.
it really is because when we come into this teaching, we learn, oh my God, I'm creating my own experience based on my own experience.
Well, that particular line, we mentally measure
We're
out
out
what
what we
we shall
shall
receive
receive
Wow. I
internally.
mean,
Yeah.
think of the relationships that didn't work for you in your life and how that was the measuring out of your expectation of your belief in how things should work. And as a result of that, of course, they did work that way, and they couldn't work any other way. I don't know if you've had the experience. I certainly have of loving somebody who believed they were unlovable and had to prove it. And they went to great lengths to prove they weren't lovable because that's what they believed. And then when I said, "Okay, I can't love you anymore," they said, "See, there we go." And
Yeah.
so this
Oh,
time
boy.
of the year, as Valentine's Day is a time to, I think, look at that and our relationship, not just to loving, but to our to projections.
Well, that's an important point. But before we do, before we get into human love relationships, which is the focus of our talk, I want to point out something else. And that is we may all feel loved even without a relationship. Because as he starts out, that love relationship is with God.
Yeah.
There is a presence in the universe that is personal to us. And that is a deep relationship that you can and hopefully will develop, and that is always available to love you. So whether you have a person in your life or not, you can meditate, feel that presence, feel the love of God for you, and feel totally complete.
And I think that first relationship is in our DNA. And because it's
Yes.
in our DNA, there's a craving, a longing, a desire, a hunger for that connection. And I think what often happens is we pass over that and try to have that connection with people or with creatures or with other things. And the problem with that, of course, is it separates us from that divine call, that divine connection. But more importantly than that is it doesn't satisfy us. And so if we're going to be satisfied by our relationship with the divine, we have to, one, choose to acknowledge it, look in the direction of it, and be open to it. And I think often, we're not, we tend to be sensorily connected. Whatever our senses tell us is true is what's true. And our senses don't always tell us about uh, the divine in our DNA connection.
Yeah, that's right. And we start looking, we start looking for love in all the wrong places often. But
You don't have to,
excuse me, what?
you didn't have to bring that up.
Bring up the past. So what I like to point out though, that I think that also we are designed genetically to be in groups,
Social.
families, nuclear families, whatever, tribes. The culture we're in now, where many people live alone, is a relatively new phenomenon for human beings.
It's an alien phenomena.
Yeah, yeah, we traditionally live with family, and even though that presents its own problems, um, this is a new situation. Also, what's new is having love be a requirement for many people. Having a love relationship used to be that marriage was really often arranged and it was more about combining family assets. And they hoped that you would eventually learn to love each other, but it wasn't even necessarily expected. And, uh, and you might find love here and there, but not necessarily in the marriage. So, but now that we have choice of who we marry and when, most of us expect a loving relationship. So to have that lifelong, we have lots to learn. And the first thing that we learn or need to learn is this: falling in love is different from loving. And falling in love happens when you meet somebody, see someone, and you project, like a movie projector, onto them your ideal lover, and you see it in them. Then, oh, look, they're showing me that, and often they do in courtship, but it's not who they really are. So you might get married or not, or live together, and suddenly, little pieces of this projection fall off when you say, well, they're not that way at all. He's not that way, or she's not that way at all. He or she is really the other way. Well, in fact, they always were. You were just with the eyes of love. Do you know what that look looks like? It's a doe-eyed look, and it's hormonal. There are hormones involved, but it's not who they are. So then you start noticing who they really are. And you go, I don't think I like that at all. Well, you didn't get to know the person well enough before you
Right.
fell in love.
Yeah, the fall part is important. You fall away from reason, fall away from everything that you know, and you fall into your own projection. One of the things that's interesting in studies that have been done looking at arranged marriages versus choice relationships is the arranged marriages have as high or higher success rate. And the thing
Mhm.
about an arranged marriage is it's agreed upon that we will figure out how to be together rather than that we will live off of the hormones until they're gone and then wonder what happened,
Yeah, exactly.
which is a lot of what happens in relationships where, we are so heated up that we're going to live off the heat. And what happens when things cool down is nobody's learned how to ignite or to keep that fire ignited. And so the first step of loving is to recognize that a lot of our loving is a projection. Before that, we need, actually, that's not the first, it's really the second. The first step is to notice that who you are is worth loving and
Yeah.
worth loving by you. And the extent to which you can't approve of you or you can't love you, you're going to have a blind spot when it comes to other people's either recognition and appreciation and love of you, or in often cases, your ability to trust and love them. We often believe unconsciously that the person that we're in love with is going to behave the way we do. And if we haven't behaved very well for ourselves and we're not happy with our own behavior, then we don't trust another person either.
And
So,
heaven forbid we've had painful experiences of love not lasting.
really?
We often project that onto
Yeah,
potential new lovers as well. Oh no, I don't want to go there. I don't want to be hurt. Uh, I don't want to have someone telling me what to do. I don't, a lot of I don't wants that can interfere with it. Finding somebody to love,
yeah,
because that's what we really want. Now, I again, I'm going to stress that the first person you need to really love and create a relationship with is God. However you understand that, so that you know you're eternally loved and you're never alone.
imagine for a minute that before you came here to this planet, before you came here into this body, that you were loved, you were in a space where there was a whole community of people helping, supporting, encouraging, in all kinds of ways to help you make this move into the earth plane to have a loving living experience. And you don't not want that when you get here. In fact, that's the first thing you look for. And the first place we look for, or the first way we look is with our eyes, and we look through it and we see our parents. And we believe that that's the God. And heaven forbid parents should ever have to be compared with God because they can't measure up to that. But that's our model. And that's the model we often are working from. But there's another earlier model. And if you meditate, you're aware of that model. You're aware that there's something more that's greater, that's rich and forgiving and accepting.
Yeah, and that is part of that DNA thing. We want to create that family of being loved and protected again. But this idea of finding somebody to love, as I say, if these pieces start falling off and you go, I don't even like this person, much less love them, it's going to be difficult to love them. You have to find somebody that the more they reveal to you, the more you find lovable. That's what enriches the love. And too often it's based on appearance. And Bob and I were talking about it earlier. He says men fall in love with the outer. They fall in love with the form, the beauty, and then they get together, and it's like, uh, I don't think I can love who she really is.
Mhm. Well,
That's a problem.
yeah, I love her parts, yeah. And I want to love her as a whole person, but and I think because I love her parts that she's going to be hot and wonderful and exciting all of the time because her parts are. And that's really awful for the woman or the man, depending on in which side you're on, that you would think the person is loving you when they're just looking at your parts and saying, "Oh, I like those. Yes, those are good. Yeah, that's what I want more of." And the person says, "What about me?" Well, later.
Well, women do this same thing,
Oh,
especially
oh
when
yeah.
when you're young. You want somebody good looking and this, that, and the other, which has nothing to do with love or a good relationship. So we need to be clear about what's important to us. One of the things we've learned is that, and I think one of the reasons that arranged marriages work well is that what really works is as many similarities as
Yeah.
possible. Sameness is like, we had the saying opposites attract, but they attract for the wrong reasons. Like if you're an extrovert and you fall in love with an introvert, no, it's usually the opposite. An introvert will fall in love with an extrovert because they think, oh, with that person, they'll get me out and socializing because on my own I won't. And so they think they'll fill that hole in me. And then what happens is they get together and stay together, and then they're fighting all the time because the extrovert always wants to do social, have people in, go out. The other one wants solitude. And though they just fight over it. So your differences are things you generally fight over. So it really is important to, especially things that are important to you, that the other person is, it's also important to them for harmony, because you want harmony in the love relationship.
I think another piece of this too is an arranged marriage implies that we have arranged to be together with or without good feeling. We've arranged to be together for the long distance. Now we have to make it work.
Hmm.
I think a lot of times what happens is folks are not involved in arranging to create their good. They're living with the idea, well, I feel good, so it must be okay. And I don't feel good anymore, therefore there's nothing for me to do except leave. And so the arranging to be, another way to view that, at least the way I view it, is imagine that you're going to be with this person for the rest of your life, like it or don't like it, good, bad, or indifferent. What are you going to do with it? And a lot of times people I see are in the qualifying mode in their relationship. Well, if she or he doesn't behave better, or I can always leave, or this is not, the question really should or could be, what could I do? What's the most I can do to make this the best that it could possibly be? And have I done that? And so you enter into the relationship much like a courtship. And during the courtship, fortunately or unfortunately, people will do extraordinary things to make it work. And then very
Hmm.
often after the courtship, they say, "Well, I did all that. I got you now."
Boom, and it can stop just
Yeah,
like that.
and in a way, an ongoing loving relationship is an endless courtship.
That's true and very
You're
important.
courting the good, you're courting the possibility of good, and every day you look at the person like you did on that first date and say, I need to discover you. I want to discover more about you. And when we're in the process of discovering, which means we're listening, we're in the process of discovering, we're watching and we're looking and we're wondering more about what this adventurous person is going to tell us about themselves. We become connected in a way that often gets lost. And I see a lot of folks our age, 40 and 45, that don't talk to me. Yeah, he said that before. I don't listen to him anymore. He just goes on and on and on. Or she'll say, and you'll hear this back and forth. And what's happened is they stopped listening, not just to what's being said, but they stop listening from their heart. They stop listening from their mind and from their soul. They stop listening like there's something you're going to say that's really worth something. They're listening for, I've heard this or I haven't heard this. What am I supposed to do with it now? What's next? And that's a very different kind of listening. That's a listening that's already been done.
Hmm.
And so part of this Valentine's equation, if it were to be a true celebration, would be I'm in it today for the very first time, even though we've been in it for 34 years.
Almost, yeah.
Yeah. And so if it's the very first time, then what would I do today? What can I do today? Because this courtship mode that you're in, courting life, courting love, courting the person that you're with, is courting the consciousness that you want to spend more time with.
I want to go back to what we were talking about with the courtship and then, let's say, the marriage or the commitment to be together. Often what happens then, we say you go from being two people in relationship so that there are six people involved in this
Oh,
relationship, and those six people are you and the parents of one and then the parents of the other. Because what you do is, as soon as you're married or committed, you start role playing. You start saying, well, a wife does this, that, and the other. Or he has his ideas of what a wife does too. And he may tell you, you have your ideas of what a good husband does. He has his ideas. But you suddenly start getting into those roles because, well, we're married now. It's different. And that's often what can happen when you go, what happened? You changed. Where's the person I was courting? And so you have to be really careful and know that and talk about it to prevent that from happening. and make agreements about it. You know, what the expectations are. People usually don't think about it, and you go on automatic because we don't have any instruction in these things. All we have is what we grew up with. And, you know, you don't know love from infatuation. You don't know what should be. So it's it's a very challenging thing to choose wisely. I'm glad people are waiting longer now
Yeah.
because they're getting more
Yeah,
experience
you
and know
should
better
wait
what they want.
until you're at least 60.
And but the problem with that now is they're also waiting longer to have children, and then we have all these fertility problems. But one thing that I wanted to say before we wrap this up is that what's really a value, we think we want someone to love us, but really what grows us, which glows us, what feels good to us is the loving part. So the loving someone is good for you. Not being loved is nice, but have you ever been loved or pursued by someone that you just want to say, "Ooh, go away"? Um, so the being loved is not really the rewarding part. The rewarding part
It's the loving.
is loving someone. So my wish for you is that you either have this deeper relationship with the divine, or with someone you can love more and more the more you get to know them, because that is what is that's what's healing and holding and helpful for
Brene
you.
Brown said something that I loved. She said, loving ourselves through the process of owning our story is the bravest thing we can ever do. The bravest thing we can ever do. Loving
Loving
ourselves
ourselves.
through the process. And I thought that's really very powerful. I love what she has to say. But then she's not a superficial person.
She is not. So, Bob spoke briefly about the things that get in the way of finding love. The biggest one is a fear of not being enough, shame about anything you've been or done in the past, the vulnerability of being hurt again. We have to get past all those hurdles. Um,
But we could imagine that all of those hurdles are our relationship with ourselves, that we often don't trust ourselves, we don't forgive ourselves. Something bad has happened, so we now believe that we're bad. Forget all of these things in relationship to another person. It starts with us.
yeah, it does. And one of my favorite books from years ago was Love is Letting Go of Fear. And that's a statement from A Course in Miracles, but it was also a book by Jerry John Paulsky, who was a psychiatrist who made his transition this year. That he was in his 90s, I think, and he found A Course in Miracles, and it really changed his life. But that's what we have to do to find love. We have to let go of our fear, fear of not being enough, fear of it not working out, all of those fears.
So we're going to do something we did last week. Again, this week, we're going to play an offertory piece of music, which is timely and I think and much fun. And we're going to turn off the recording part of this so that we can play it because it's copyrighted and we don't want to infringe on copyrights on it. And when we broadcast this over again, but we are going to go and hopefully today we're going to be less awkward in doing that. So while we're playing this video, think about the value that you find in sharing time with us and
Yes, share your good with
share
the
your good.
center.
Yeah.
Yeah, share your good, share your finances. This is our offertory music. So we will stop the recording.